Have you ever wanted to stay young a little longer, put off aging? This is a dream of the ages, but scientists have for a long time thought this was just never going to be possible. They thought, you just wear out, something you can do about it, kind of like an old shoe. If you look in nature, you see that different kinds of animals can have really different lifespans. Now, these animals are different from one another because they have different genes. So that suggests that somewhere in these genes, somewhere in the DNA, are genes for aging, genes that allow them to have different lifespans. So if there are genes like that, then you can imagine that you could change one of the genes in an experiment, an aging one. Maybe you could slow down aging and extend lifespan. And if you could do that, then you could find the genes for aging. If they exist and you can find them, then maybe one could eventually do something about it. So we set out to look for genes that control aging. And we didn't study any of these animals. Instead, we studied a little tiny round one called C. elegans, which is just about the size of a comet in a sense. And we're really optimistic that we can find something because there has been a report of a long-lived mutant. So we started to change genes at random, looking for long-lived animals, and we were very lucky to find that mutations that damage one single gene called DAF2 double the lifespan of the little worm. So you can see in black, after a month, they're very short-lived, that's why we like to study them, because they're really aging. In black, after a month, the normal ones are all dead. But at that time, most of the mutant worms are still alive, and it isn't until twice as long that they're all dead. And now I want to show you what they actually look like in this movie here. So the first thing you're going to see is the normal worm when it's about college student age, young adult. It's quite a cute little fellow. And next you're going to see the long-lived mutant when it's young. So this animal is going to live twice as long. Is it miserable? It doesn't seem to be. It's very active. You can't tell the difference, really. And they can be completely fertile, have the same number of progeny as the normal ones do. Now get out your handkerchiefs here. You're going to see in just 2 weeks, the normal ones are old. You can see the little head moving down at the bottom there, but everything else is just lying there. The animal's clearly in the nursing home. And if you look at the tissues of the animal, they're starting to deteriorate. Even if you've never seen one of these little C. elegans, probably most of you haven't seen one, you can tell they're old. Isn't that interesting? So there's something about aging that's kind of universal. And now here is the DAF2 mutant. One gene is changed out of 20,000, and look at it. It's the same age, but it's not in a nursing home. It's going skiing. So it's aging, actually. This is what's really cool. It's aging more slowly. It takes us for 2 days to age as much as the normal one ages in 1 day. When I tell people about this, they tend to think of maybe a 90 or 80 or 90-year-old person who looks really good for being 90 or 80, but it's really more like this. Suppose let's say you're a 30-year-old guy, or in your 30s, and you're a bachelor, and you're dating people, and you meet someone that you really like, you get to know her, and you're in a restaurant, and you say, well, how old are you? She says, I'm 60. That's what it's like. And you would never know. You'd never know until she told you. Okay, so what is the DAF2 gene? Well, as you know, genes, which are part of the DNA, they're instructions to make a protein that does something. And the DAF2 gene encodes a hormone receptor. So what you see in the picture there is a cell with the hormone receptor in red punching through the edge of the cell. So part of it is like a baseball glove. Part of it's on the outside, and it's catching the hormone as it comes by in green. And the other part is on the inside where it sends signals into the cell. Okay, so what is the DAF2 receptor telling the inside of the cell? I just told you that if you make a mutation in the DAF2 gene so that you get a receptor that doesn't work as well, the animal lives longer. So that means that the normal function of this hormone receptor is to speed up aging. That's what that arrow means. It speeds up aging. It makes it go faster. So it's like the animal has the Grim Reaper inside of itself, speeding up aging. Okay, so this is altogether really interesting. It says that aging is subject to control by the genes, and specifically by hormones. So what kind of hormones are these? There are lots of hormones. There's testosterone, adrenaline, you know about a lot of them. These hormones are similar to hormones that we have in our bodies. The DAF2 hormone receptor is very similar to the receptor for the hormone insulin and IGF-1. Now, you've all heard of at least insulin. Insulin is a hormone that promotes the uptake of nutrients into your tissues after you eat a meal. And the hormone IGF-1 promotes growth. So these functions were known for these hormones for a long time, but our studies suggested that maybe they have a third function that nobody knew about. maybe they also affect aging. And it's looking like that's the case. So after we made our discoveries with little C. elegans, people who worked on other kinds of animals started asking if we make the same DAF2 mutation, the hormone receptor mutation, in other animals, will they live longer? And that is the case in flies. If you change this hormone pathway in flies, they live longer, and also in mice. And mice are mammals like us. So it's an ancient pathway because it must have arisen a long time ago in evolution, so such that it still works in all these animals. And they also, the common precursor, also gave rise to people. So maybe it's working in people the same way. And there are hints of this. So for example, there's one study that was done in a population of Ashkenazi Jews in New York City. And just like any population, most of the people, will live to about 70 or 80, but some live to be 90 or 100. And what they found was that there were people who lived to 90 or 100 were more likely to have DAF2 mutations, that is, changes in the gene that encodes the receptor for IGF-1. And these changes made the gene not act as well as the normal gene would have acted. They damaged the gene. Okay, so those are hints suggesting that humans are susceptible to the effects of these hormones for aging. So the next question, of course, is there any effect on age-related disease? As you age, you're much more likely to get cancer, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, all sorts of diseases. It turns out that these long-lived mutants are more resistant to all these diseases. They hardly get cancer, and when they do, it's not as severe. So it's really interesting, and it makes sense in a way that they're still young, so why would they be getting diseases of aging until they're old? So it suggests that if we could, have a therapeutic or a pill to take to replicate some of these effects in humans, maybe we would have a way of combating lots of different age-related diseases all at once. So how can a hormone ultimately affect the rate of aging? How could that work? Well, it turns out that in the DAF2 mutants, a whole lot of genes are switched on in the DNA that encode proteins that protect the cells and the tissues and to repair damage. And the way that they're switched on is by a gene regulator protein called FOXO. So in a DAF2 mutant, you see that I have the X drawn here through the receptor. The receptor isn't working as well. Under those conditions, the FOXO protein in blue has gone into the nucleus, that little compartment there in the middle of the cell, and it's sitting down on a gene binding to it. Well, you see one gene. There are lots of genes actually that bind a FOXO, and it's just sitting on one of them. So FOXO turns on a lot of genes, and the genes it turns on includes antioxidant genes, genes I call carrot giver genes, whose protein products actually help other proteins to function well, to fold correctly and function correctly. And it can also escort them to the garbage cans of the cell and recycle them if they're damaged. DNA repair genes are more active in these animals, and the immune system is more active. And many of these different genes we've shown actually contribute to the long lifespan of the DAF2 mutant. So it's really interesting. These animals have within them the latent capacity to live much longer than they normally do. They have the ability to protect themselves from many kinds of damage, which we think makes them live longer. So what about the normal worm? Well, when the DAF2 receptor is active, then it triggers a series of events that prevent FOXO from getting into the nucleus where the DNA is. So it can't turn the genes on. That's how it works. That's why we don't see the long lifespan until we have the DAF2 mutant. But what good is this for the worm? Well, we think that the insulin and IGF-1 hormones are hormones that are particularly active under favorable conditions in the good times, when